You know, when you think of massive empires, you think of Rome, right? Which took centuries to build. Well, at its absolute peak, the Mongol Empire was the largest contiguous land empire in all of human history. It stretched from the Sea of Japan all the way to the plains of Hungary. And the craziest part? It was basically built in a single lifetime. So that begs the question, how? How in the world did a nomadic people from the steppes conquer pretty much everything? Okay, let's get into it.
Everything, and I mean everything, starts right here on the massive, unforgiving Mongolian steppe. This is not a place where life is easy. It's a land of brutal winters and scorching summers. It's an environment that forged a people who were just as tough and resilient. They were masters of survival long before they ever became masters of conquest.
And at the very heart of this incredible story is one man, a boy named Temujin. Now, he didn't start out as a prince or a king with some grand destiny. No, he was an outcast. He was abandoned by his own people, he was hunted, he was even enslaved. So how does someone go from rock bottom, the absolute lowest of the low, to becoming Genghis Khan, the leader of all people? That's really the question we're going to unpack here.
Handle on the empire, you first have to understand the man. In his early life, it wasn't just a struggle. It was a non-stop, brutal series of betrayals and hardships that would go on to shape his entire view of the world.
Okay, just look at the speed of this rise. It's absolutely staggering. When he's just 9 years old, his father gets poisoned and his own tribe just leaves him and his family for dead. For years, he is a total nobody, just trying to survive. But through pure grit and determination, he starts gathering followers. And by 1206, he's done the impossible. He's united every single warring tribe on the steppe under his command. It is one of history's greatest underdog stories, period.
But here's the thing, his rise to power wasn't easy. In fact, his biggest rival was his own blood brother, a guy named Jamaka. And this slide really gets to the heart of their conflict. See, Jamaka was all about tradition. Power belonged to the nobles, to the right families. But Temujin, he had this radical, revolutionary idea for the steppes. Power should be based on what you can do. Your skill, your loyalty, that's what mattered, not who your dad was.
So, uniting the tribes was one thing, but turning these scattered nomads into the single most effective, terrifying military force on the planet, that was something else entirely. And this is where the genius of Genghis Khan as an organizer, as a nation builder, really comes into play. What he did was, he basically broke all the old rules.
First, that idea of meritocracy, it became the law of the land. The best man gets the job. Second, he organized every single warrior into a super strict decimal system, groups of 10, 100, 1,000. This wasn't just for counting heads, it created this ironclad discipline. If one guy ran from a battle, the other 9 in his unit were executed, no exceptions. And third, he created a universal law code for everyone. And one of those laws was absolutely sacred. You do not harm messengers or envoys. Keep that one in mind because it's going to become really, really important later.
All right, so with this brand new Mongol machine, an army that was disciplined, organized, and loyal only to him, Genghis Khan turned his eyes outward, beyond the steppe, and the rest of the world had absolutely no idea what was about to hit it. The Mongol way of war was just this terrifying mix of different strategies. They moved faster than any army in history. They used terror itself as a weapon, spreading stories of their brutality so cities would just surrender without a fight. They weren't great siege engineers at first, but they learned, capturing Chinese experts and forcing them to build their siege weapons. And they perfected tactics like the feigned retreat, where they'd pretend to run away, lure their enemies into a trap, and then just annihilate them. But maybe their most fearsome tool, the one that really defined their conquests, was something we could call practical brutality. And this is where that sacred law comes roaring back into the story. Genghis Khan sends a trade mission to the very powerful Khwarezmian Empire. But the local governor gets greedy, seizes all the goods, and executes the merchants. So Genghis, he sends envoys, ambassadors, to demand justice. Well, the Shah of the empire executes one of the envoys and sends the others back with their beards shaved off, a massive insult. For Genghis Khan, this wasn't just an insult, it was a violation of the highest law of his land.
So, before the Mongols showed up, the region of Khorasan in that empire was a thriving center of art, science, and civilization. It was home to about 2 million people.
And after the Mongol invasion, after Genghis Khan was done, the population was just 200,000. That's a 90% drop.
That is practical brutality. It wasn't just random violence. It was a cold, calculated message to the rest of the world. Resist us, and you will be completely and utterly erased from existence.
Genghis Khan managed to conquer the world, but there was one thing he could never conquer: the bitter rivalries within his own family. And ironically, the very system he set up to manage his massive empire would be the exact thing that tore it all apart.
In 1227, the Great Khan is dead. But the question of succession, of who comes next, had been a huge problem for years. He had 4 sons by his main wife. All of them were brilliant, ambitious, and powerful commanders. The problem? They hated each other. Like really, truly could not stand one another. So Genghis Khan's solution was to just give each of his sons a huge chunk of the world to rule. But as you can see, this solution basically became the problem. It created 4 competing kingdoms instead of one empire. The bad blood between Jochi and Chagatai in particular was toxic, and with Ogedei chosen as the official successor, it was just a recipe for a massive family feud over who was really in charge. And that family feud exploded just 1 generation later. 2 of Genghis's grandsons, Kublai and Arik-Boke, both declared themselves the Great Khan and went to war. Now, this wasn't a war against an outside enemy. This was Mongol versus Mongol, brother against brother. It was the devastating conflict that officially and permanently shattered the unity of the empire.
After that civil war, the dream of a single, unified Mongol Empire was totally dead. What rose from the ashes wasn't one empire, but 4 very different ones.
And here they are, the 4 successor states. Each one of them would go on to have its own unique history. You've got Kublai Khan's Yuan dynasty in China, the Il Khanate in Persia, the Golden Horde in what is now Russia, and the Chagatai Khanate right in the middle of Central Asia. They all started out Mongol, but over time, they became deeply connected to the cultures that they now ruled.
So, what's the big takeaway here? Well, the Mongol legacy is just full of contradictions. On one hand, by controlling the entire Silk Road, they created an era of relative peace and trade called the Pax Mongolica. They connected east and west like never before, allowing ideas like gunpowder and paper money to spread. But on the other hand, that exact same connection, that same open highway, is what allowed the Black Death to travel west and kill tens of millions of people. They were brutal conquerors, yes, but their descendants became great patrons of art and culture in places like China and Persia.
And that leaves us with one final big question. The Mongol Empire was forged by the sheer will of one man and then held together by the raw ambition of his family. But you have to wonder, was a foundation built on conquest and personal loyalty ever going to be strong enough to last? It's a question that you could really ask about any of the great empires throughout history.
The Mongol Empire rose from the cold winds of the steppe, exploding like a storm across 3 continents. But like all great empires, it was destroyed by the conflicts in its own blood. The story of Genghis Khan reminds us that one man can change history, but no one can hold power forever when people are divided. If you want to continue your journey of discovering mysterious epic stories, subscribe to the Turning Point channel to watch the next part.